This conference will now be
so we can-
recorded.
Okay, so I think we are ready to get started.
Good morning, everybody, to today's Upper Rio Grande Flood Planning Group meeting. I believe we've met quorum, and so to ensure it for the recording, I'd like to call everybody's name at the meeting. So by the order of the cameras, Dave Hall. Can you say aye, present?
Hi, I present.
Javier Acosta.
Present.
Mr. Jeff Bennett.
Present.
Levy Brian.
Present.
Carlos Velarde.
Present.
Jay Ornelas.
Present.
Gilberto Saldana.
Present.
Then Sal Masood.
Present.
And then Rene Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, we can't hear you.
Present. Can you hear me? Present.
I can hear him.
Yes, we can hear him there.
Gilbert, are you? Oh, he's on mute. I'll go ahead and introduce the team. So I see that Gilbert who's on the meeting. We have Brian Blaisdell. We have Chris Wright, and then we also have Mr. Irvin. I saw him on here as well. And then I also see that we have Buddhist. We have Mark meeting as well. And then Richard, would you like to announce Water Development Board team?
Yes. So I'm Richard Reagan, representing the Texas Water Development Board, but we also have Matt Nelson and Morgan White, which are part of our flood planning team here at the Water Development Board.
And I did see Matt Nelson. I think Matt Nelson's here also.
Yeah.
Okay. See Lily Cartwright and Ty Edwards and Alejandra Marco. If you all would like to introduce yourselves.
Sure, Alejandra Marco with AECOM. Lily Cartwright with AECOM.
Ashlyn Bain with AECOM.
And I apologize. I don't know why it keeps doing that. So hopefully it won't do that through the whole session. But just to remind everybody, we are recording. I guess when the callers come in, that's what's happening, to let them know. So I did see that Mr. Dilbert Humberson from IBWC is on the meeting as well now. Hi there. Okay,
Hi,
so
sorry about that.
I think we could turn it over to you now.
Okay. So is anybody else joining us from the phone? I know Jay's on the phone, and then your phone number is there. I only see two phone numbers, two callers. Anybody else?
believe Mr. Saldana's voice is
Okay, I
through the
think that's
phone.
everybody then. All right.
Okay.
Okay. So item number 3, member updates. I know with the heavy rains here in the region, there's plenty to share. I know a lot of that content, ACOM will cover it in today's presentation. Just another thing, El Paso Water had a sewer line break that is currently in the being river pretty much all throughout. So other than that, anybody else have anything to share?
Omar, if you can repeat that, I don't know that we caught everything of it.
Okay, so there was a major sewer line break in the El Paso Upper Valley, of which it's being right now diverted into the river. If you head over to the river in the Upper Valley, you can smell this situation. So I'm hoping that we don't get a major flood event, because then we'll we'll have sewer plus flood to deal with around the Rio Grande area. And then beyond that, is there anything else anybody wants to share?
Just, Omar, do you know how long that break is? What their do they have plans to fix it soon, or what the status is on
They are
repairs?
working on it. Right now, it's being diverted into the American Canal, but today a request is being made so that it goes back ultimately into the river. So you're going to see it around the Santa Fe port of entry, then downtown El Paso. You can see all that water around there, if it even gets to that point.
But no prognosis of when repairs would be done.
We hear that they're working on it. I don't have an estimate yet.
This has been a week now, is it right?
I think so.
Oh, does Delbert want to say anything? Mr. Hummerson. Delbert.
Dilbert, did you want to share anything from IBWC's perspective?
No, Gilbert and Naya had warned us and told us, I guess about a week ago, about the break. And just, we told our guys to stay out, be careful when there was flow in the river, but nothing else to add. They're monitoring it along with you guys, and I think you summed it up pretty much. I thought it'd be fixed by now from the initial estimates, but
I think maybe if Isela gets on the line, we can definitely ask her
Yeah, she'll know.
if she can give us a heads up. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else anybody wants to share? Okay. Hearing nothing. Item number 4, review and approve the minutes for the meeting held on August 5th, 2021. Does anybody have any corrections to be made? Okay. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as they are.
So moved.
move to approve.
Sal was the first. Who was second?
Second.
Okay, Javier seconded.
Mhm.
With the first and a second, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Item number 5, Texas Water Development Board update.
Hi, everyone. This is Richard Bagans with the Texas Water Development Board. I just want to say welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining virtually. One of the things that has happened since we last met is that the governor's emergency declaration has expired and has not been renewed as of September 1st. So the Open Meetings Act rules go pre-pandemic, and the emergency declaration are now back in effect. And so Annette and Omar are created this meeting around those rules, making sure that the chair is present in a public accessible location. and them asking for all of the members to have their cameras on at all times. That seems to also be what they are requiring. So because of that, Annette was gracious to join in on a sponsor conference call throughout all the regions back in August to discuss different ways all the regions are kind of handling this. Do we go hybrid or do we go in-person meetings? There are a couple regions that are doing in-person only meetings. But then for the largest region, the Upper Rio Grande, Annette was exploring ways to keep it hybrid, especially with other spikes in COVID cases. So it is, I thank Annette for her contributions to that meeting. I think a lot of regions that were going in person, we're trying to push to have more hybrid options available. So that was a great discussion. Other big news coming is that the legislature appropriated additional funding towards this regional flood planning process. And we sent out the survey in July to see ideas on how that should be allocated. And we have reviewed that, compiled all the region's requests, and we are bringing that to the TWDB board in late September. So prior to that late September date, all that information will become public, and more news will be able to be shared around that time. The tech memo, certain deliverables have been given a timeline extension, mostly dealing with the task 2 for the data collection for the modeling of existing and future conditions. So that was a large request by all the regions as well during the survey, just because this is the first cycle and longer time period needed for data collection, so that they only have to run the models once and not have to do a do-over later. All the other deliverables are still in place due that January 7th date, but some of the task 2 items are given an extension. And lastly, later in this month, or maybe early October, we'll be having a payment request webinar for all the regions, just to give them tips on how to submit payment requests to keep the money flowing to sponsor and to the technical consultants. I believe that is all the updates I have on my end. Does anybody have any questions for me at this moment?
Hey, Richard, it's Dave Hall. Does that extension change the January suspense or just the extension for task 2?
There are 3 specific deliverables that received, I believe it's March, I believe a 2-month extension until March. It's just for those specific deliverables. Most of the deliverables are still due that January 7th. But it gives the technical consultants a little more flexibility on the task 2 items.
So the tech memo itself is still due January?
Yes, and again, that's it. Looking at the deliverables, it's such as just like summaries and lists and charts of the different early tasks, tasks 1, 3, and 4. But again, no fully complete chapters are due at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, thanks all. Well, I look forward to the rest of the meeting, and I will be listening in.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, item number 6, update from liaisons from the Lower Rio Grande Flood Planning Group. And then
This is not on there.
Venice is not here? Okay. So then Sarah, is there anything you want to share with us that happened on the other?
Not too terribly much. Honestly, there was a presentation from half, and then they went over, they had a public comment period in which they got several comments about floodplain maps being incorrect, particularly from the city of Bayview, sorry. So I don't really have too much for y'all, but I'm continuing to monitor.
Thanks. Appreciate your work. Okay. Item number 7, AECOM, general RFP updates.
Okay, so AECOM, Gilbert, would you like me to make you all the presenter, or do you want me to bring up the slides and I run the deck? What would you like?
You know what I think, Brian? Do you want to go ahead and run the deck?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay,
I
let
think
me
we'll
do
do that. Annette, thanks.
Okay.
And good morning, everybody. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Annette. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gilbert Andujo, and I'm the PM for AECOM on this project. Today, I'm going to be assisted with this update by the following team members. We've got Jeff Urban on the line. We've got Chris Wright. We've got Brian Blaisdell. We've got Martin Bartlett, and we've got Susan Roth. You want to go to the next slide, Brian? And then Omar, just an FYI, we will be requiring some discussion and action by the flood planning group here. So we've got some cues in the presentation on that that's going to kind of bring it up, and then we'll discuss how we want to work through that. So today we're going to be giving you a general update on the RFP, which is going to involve task 1, which is the planning area description. Like Omar had said earlier, we're going to give you all an overview of some recent flooding on some recent storms that we've had here in El Paso. We're going to cover the regulation and development codes, cover some agricultural and natural resources maps, look at some socioeconomic characteristics for some of the regions that we've done up to date, and just kind of give you a list of the previous flood mitigation projects and local regional flood plans that we've put together so far. We're also going to give you an overview on the task 2, which is evaluating best available floodplain data and exposure and vulnerability analysis. We're also going to cover subcommittee meetings. We're going to do roadshow meetings, and we're going to cover the public outreach and survey out and stakeholder coordination. Next slide. And what we've done here is we've kind of given you the title to go along with each of the agenda items that we have. That way you all can follow along, because it's going to be a presentation that covers items 7 through 9, I think 7 through 9 or 10. Next slide. And now I want to go ahead and
you have to go back a slide. Go back a slide. Okay, next slide. Okay.
And I think we can go on to the next one, Brian.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to cover an overview of the recent storms.
So is there a way, Brian, for me to actually point with mine while you're working the deck? Okay, it looks like you're going to have to do the pointing for me. All right, so what I'm going to cover is just very briefly in a qualitative fashion, because I think it's on everybody's mind, what happened on August 12th and 13th. Been a lot of discussion on how bad were those storms, and we'll talk a bit about what happened on the 2 main days, which was the 12th and the 13th, and talk about which was worse and how do they compare to 2006. Next slide. All right, so these are 3 radar images. They aren't from the same exact type of data set, so they aren't exactly apples to apples, but they provide, with the gradations and the coloring, it provides where the greatest rainfall depths were on those particular days. The one on the left, you can, just to orient you, you can see the outline of the incorporated area of the city of El Paso. You can see I-10 running through the lower part of the incorporated part of the city of El Paso. And in the part that's between the 2 wings of the city, that's where the Franklins are. So you can pretty much see where the crest of the Franklins are in each of these radar images. And you can see that you can also see on each figure, you can see a yellow dot. That's the location of individual point gauges that measured rainfall on each of the days. And we'll talk a bit about what was seen at each of those stations as we go through this. Just qualitatively looking at what happened on each day. In 2006, the big bulk of the rainfall, which fell on the western side of the Franklins, although you can see on the east side of the Franklins, there were some individual spots of a lot of rain. You can see where we had the debris flows on the east side is where we had the deeper rains on the east side. On August 12th, you can see that the high intensity was all pretty much directly over the part of the city north of IH-10 on the east side, in the lower part of the central part of the region on the east side of the Franklins. And you can see on August 13th that the deeper rainfall was all down on the Rio Grande Terrace as opposed to up high in the Franklin. Let's go on to the next slide. So looking at what was happening on the east side of the Franklins, we've got those 3 gauges that I pointed out on the previous map, and we're going to talk about them. In August in 2006. In 2006, we had a high rainfall. The highest rainfall we had in an hour in 2006 at that gauge was about 1.5 inches. And you can see in comparison on August 12th, we had over 3 inches in an hour. So the 1 hour duration storm in 2006 was about a 10-year storm, whereas the 1 hour storm on August 12th was about a 230-year storm. So a very extreme storm. And we get up to the 24-hour durations, we can see that 2006 had very high totals, 6 inches for a 24-hour case. And on the 12th, we still had high numbers, but there wasn't that much more rain between 1 hour and 24 hours. So the return period for the 24-hour storm was only about 30 years. Over 4 days, both of them were extreme storms on the east side. Let's go to the west side, next slide. What this slide shows is that in the choice of this rainstorm, particularly on August 12th, was very spotty. So when I choose a storm, a gauge to be representative of the storm, I just want you to make sure I'm not choosing the most extreme gauge that's out there. In that area on the east side of the Franklins, these are hourly totals at gauge locations. And there's 3.4 inches, 3.18 inches, that's the gauge I chose, and the 3.0 inches. So over 3 inches in an hour was measured several times over that region. So that's a pretty accurate number. And so that extreme nature of the storm extended over a lot of that area. There's one gauge there that has 5.6 inches. I don't remember, these aren't weather service gauges. These are personal rain gauges. That 5.6 is probably an outlier, so I wouldn't pass around what the return period was for that particular storm. Next slide. So on the west side, basically in 2006, we had an extreme flood depth for the 24-hour storm, not so extreme for the 1 hour storm. And down in the river terrace, we didn't have that big a storm in the 1 hour duration. But as we got to the 24-hour and the 4-day, it got to be bigger. But because we don't have a lot of capacity in some of those streets and so on the west side, it was severe flooding, but that flooding occurs relatively often in that location. It wasn't that extreme a storm for the west side as there was on the east side. Next slide. So there's a couple of things on these tables that I've shown. Down in the bottom, it shows how you do designs. What the city has is their criteria for design, and the designs for channels, culverts, bridges, retention basins, and detention basins are all based basically on the 100-year flood. But channels, culverts, and bridges aren't designed based upon the 24-hour flood. They're based upon a much shorter duration storm, usually 1 hour or less. And the detention basins are all sized to basically retain the large volume associated with a 24-hour period. So we can see that what we would expect is that on the east side on August 12th, because we had that extreme short duration storm, all the channels and culverts and bridges and streets and everything for that period, that hour and a half, everything was well beyond the capacity that they were designed for. On the east side and on both sides of the Franklins, the detention basins, with some exceptions, pretty much were able to hold back the floods, and the ones, because you can see that we had on the west side we had over 100-year flood, and on the east side we had about equal to the 100-year flood over 4 days. So they were extreme events, but the worst event in terms of exceeding capacities was the short-term event over the east side. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, otherwise we'll go on to the next part of this presentation.
I have a question. My question is, we talk about 100-year storm and so forth, and I understand. But when I'm looking at the red, which is 250 and 230 years storms, we don't have enough data to go back more than 140 years. So how is it that we can say that these storms are 250 years? Because that's where there's not insufficient data. And I know this because I just helped my daughter do a paper for her school. And we just kept records, started keeping good records, and the start of it was 1880. That's 130 years. So my thing is that.
Okay, so basically we really only have 24-hour data since 1947. So we really only have 73 years of daily data.
I think that we should
for hourly
really
data,
start looking at that it's just for 200, you know?
All right, so
that's the only thing I have a question with.
All right, so basically we have 70 years of daily data. We have 70 years of hourly data, but both of those are only at the El Paso gauge. We only start getting hourly data other than at the El Paso airport. We only start getting more data starting around the early 2000s. So you're exactly right. These numbers are all based upon fitting the data to a distribution. So it's all mathematical magic. It's just like when you fit a normal distribution curve to grades, you're able to grade everybody within certain ranges. It's the same thing with rainfall data. You fit whatever number of years of data you have to a distribution, and then the distribution allows you to predict beyond. But it's basically the less amount of data you have, the less accurate you have for the numbers. But in order to have a basis for design, you have to fit the available data you have to get that 100-year storm, because we don't have 100 years of data. We only have 70 years in one location, and then we have lesser numbers of years Actually, we have 70 years in 3 locations. We have it at Isleta at the airport and at La Tuna on the west side. That's it. What I suggest is if you would like to know more about this, let's talk about it after everybody else gets off the call, because this could take us a while. Are there any questions? Any other questions? All right, back to you, Gilbert.
Next slide, Brian. Next
Oh,
one.
I left off. Well, go ahead. Go on to Brian.
All righty, thanks, Jeff. Now, right now, we're just going to look at the floodplain regulation and development codes. I know we have reviewed for local floodplain regulations. We're looking at the FIS reports, we're looking at the 9 different counties and the cities. We're also looking at TFMA higher standards. We're looking at all the stormwater master plans and regional and county water management plans. We're also reviewing the local development codes. Here in this region, the El Paso Drainage Manual is one of the biggest local codes that is here. We are looking at subdivision regulations within the cities for all the 9 counties, and also using TxDOT hydraulic design manual. You know, just a quick note here, a lot of these areas are either rural or undeveloped, and the local regulations apply predominantly to existing development. And then we don't have anything for conditions in the future. So we're assuming these documents will have future development, will be regulated so that flood risks will not be increased. And also we've got a survey that we'll be discussing a little later on, and based off the information we get from that, we're going to be able to augment our data sets and of the existing regulations that we have right now. Next slide. So here we're looking at the agricultural resources. This is a screenshot. We took it from the USDA cropland data. And as you can see, there's several crops out there on there. As far as the numbers are concerned, about 61% of the region is covered with grassland and pasture, followed by 2 biggest crops on there, which is going to be cotton and pecans. And that's about 18.5 and 16.8% respectively. Now, if we exclude the grassland pasture land out there, cotton and pecans, you know, obviously go up. Excluding them, cotton and pecans are at 48 and 44% of the cropland. Although cotton and pecans are flood irrigated, overwatering these crops can have some negative impact on there. As you can see in the El Paso and Hudspeth County, we have a lot of the crops there that are along the Rio Grande Valley. And looking at this particular one, we've got some crops up higher up in the Hudspeth County up there, but we don't think those are in much of a risk since they're in the higher elevations, as well as the other ones within Pecos and Reeves County. Next slide. The next slide is we're also showing an inset of the Pecos and the Reeves County there, just to show you that you know, there are crops in there, and Presidio is highly cultural in there. Next slide. So now we're looking at the region-wide socioeconomic summary here. You know, the SVI is an index that measures 15 social and economic factors that include poverty, lack of vehicle access, food access, and crowded housing, among others. Vulnerable populations are more likely to be negatively impacted by flooding and have less resources to recover after a flood event. As you can see here, we've got a map of social vulnerability. We've got population growth rates and the largest number of employers within the region. Here, within the region, we've got 99% of the tracts are highly impacted. And what that means, a score of 98% means that its population is more vulnerable than about 98% of all census tracts in the nation. As you can see here, we've got a population growth that is positive. It's 2.32%, which is higher than the Texas and the United States population growth. So we're looking here in about 30 years, we're looking to almost double our populations. And through the region, we've got 15.3% of the people live below the poverty line. And like I mentioned earlier, government, retail trade, healthcare, and social assistance are the highest employers in there. And within the region, about 13.7% of large businesses are within floodplains. And when we're talking about a large business, we're talking about businesses that have over 100 employees. Next slide. We also took a look at three different regions in the area too. We looked at the El Paso County region here, and the reason we chose these right now is because and we'll talk about it later, we're scheduling some road shows in which we'll be covering El Paso. We're hoping to cover El Paso, Pecos, and the Presidio region. But here, look at the numbers here in El Paso. 95% of El Paso County is vulnerable. Our population growth is not as good. It's less than the Texas average, but it is more than the United States average, and 19.1% of the people live below the poverty level. And government, healthcare, and retail services are the highest employees here. And it's a pretty high number here. To 61% of large businesses are within the floodplain. Next slide. Here now we're looking at Presidio County. Again, it's a very vulnerable tract. It's got negative population growth, obviously less than the Texas and the United States average here. 19.2% of people live below the poverty line. And again, the highest jobs are government, agricultural, and accommodation and food services. As you can see, we don't show anybody being in the floodplain, but that doesn't really mean anything because they don't have too many employers that are over 100 in Presidio County. Next slide. So now we're looking at the town of Pecos. Again, they're a little less vulnerable than the rest of the region here. We've got a, positive population growth with them. It kind of matches the Texas growth rate, and it is above United States. Poverty level there is 22.1% below. The jobs there, again, government, mining and oil and gas extraction, and construction. And again, we didn't have any large employers within the floodplain. Next slide. Just to mention here, I don't want to go through all of them, but these are some of the flood studies we've already put together. We've got the 2D FEMA mapping for El Paso County. We've got the interior drainage analysis. We've got the El Paso Master Drainage Plan 2021 and the 2010 original one, the County Stormwater Master Plan, the Emergency Action Plan for EP Water, and the Army Corps EP Water Northwest Feasibility Study, Donovan Interior Drainage Analysis. And that's just to name a few. And right now we're still currently working on, on getting these flood studies together. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brian, who's going to cover the floodplain data.
All right, thanks, Gilbert. As Gilbert discussed, we're pulling together the floodplain data from various sources that he mentioned. And while that's going on, we're also using the current TWDB flood quilt to begin our task 2 analysis of flood to identify flood exposure areas as well as vulnerability across the region. So we know that there's some significant gaps in the flood quilt just already, even with considering those studies that he mentioned. Primarily, a lot of those gaps exist outside of El Paso County. Large gaps exist in Reeves County, Pecos County, Presidio County, as well as the northeast part of the region. These areas can be filled. We have the Fathom flood data set that we'll be talking about in a little more detail. As Richard mentioned, we're anticipating some Fathom data to be released later this year, and there will be substantial improvements to that data set. However, we are able to use the preliminary cursory information that's available to identify how that data set may be useful in filling the gaps. And so we can see a large portion of those areas that we're filling, we may need to fill those gaps with Fathom data set exists in the Northeast, like I mentioned, especially around Pecos, town of Pecos City, while the available data from FEMA and other sources will represent or be useful in the northwest part of the region and also in the southeast where there's more preliminary or FEMA data. So looking at the vulnerability, there's many ways to look at vulnerability. Socioeconomic factors, as Gilbert mentioned, are just one of those ways. We can also look at it from the standpoint of critical facilities such as hospitals, fire stations, or schools. We can also look at it from a purely density standpoint, population density. So we're looking here at the daytime, nighttime population data. And what we can see from this, and while the nighttime population the density shows to be pretty uniform, we can see the daytime population shows areas of higher density, which makes sense because of commuting along I-10. We also have the high trafficked areas downtown. So we can use the density from this daytime population data set to identify potentially vulnerable areas just from the standpoint of where people are most present during the day, and if it were to flood in those particular areas, it could affect a large number of people. We're also looking, let me go back to this actually, and I will mention that the areas that show high density, population density, also correlate with the areas of high vulnerability from the socioeconomic SVI data standpoint. So high density areas are also highly vulnerable in that other way as well. So we're looking at the roadways as well with the available flood quilt data, doing an overlay between those two to identify where those potential flood areas might be across the roadway. As is going to be the case throughout this flood planning process, a large number of the impacted assets are located in El Paso County. They're along the Rio Grande. So we can see just a comparison here between the 1% and 0.2% annual chance floods. From a critical facility standpoint, we're looking not just at which structures are flooding or within the flood hazard area, but also which structures may be cut off from emergency access. During a flood, if a building were to catch on fire or if there would be a medical emergency, it's critical for the emergency services to be able to access those. So even buildings that may not be in the floodplain but are maybe obstructed from those critical facilities by a floodplain are a big concern. And so we've begun to identify those areas both for the 1% and 0.2% annual chance floods within the available data sets. And so you can just see an example of these different areas throughout El Paso County. And then with that, I'll pass it off to Chris, who will talk about the subcommittee planning.
I have a question, if I can ask it, Chris.
Yes,
back to that previous slide set, please. Does this focus on a comparison between the population areas and the two flood-prone areas, or the flood-prone areas that we focused on from 06 and 13? Did you do a crosswalk that actually focuses on those areas, or is this kind of generic?
This is more generic. Are you referring to like areas that were identified from previous floods that had impacts?
Yeah, I'm just kind of interested to know if you might have done a crosswalk between the population areas that you identified on your population slide for daytime populations and the heavy areas of flooding that occurred in 06 and 13 to see where we might be able to pay attention to future, activities, improvements
Sure.
in our planning and strategies.
Yeah, definitely. So as part of the next month data gathering effort with our survey, we'll be collecting more information about those specific impacts from past floods. So we will be able to do that comparison more effectively with more data that we receive. So.
Okay, and then you can crosswalk those with your high daytime population areas, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question or a comment on the slide titled Local Floodplain Regulation and Development Codes. You all make the assumption that future development in rural, non-developed areas would be regulated so that flood risk would not be increased. I don't think that's a valid or fair assumption. I don't know how that changes what y'all do, but it's just not happening. Somewhere somebody today is filling in a floodplain and fixing to build in it. So I just don't think it's a good assumption.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that comment. We'll be talking more to the local governments and communities to better understand the future flood regulations, if any, and help to guide. That will be a large part of task 3 is in setting goals for improving those development codes, and hopefully future condition considerations will be a large part of that.
I've had 2 different folks reach out to me about county commissioners issuing orders to manage floodplains on private property in ways that I think should be looked at. I'll just put it that way. So anyway, it's a real issue. I'd be happy to talk to you more about it if you like.
Okay, awesome. All right, if no other questions, Chris, would you like to pick it up?
Sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the subcommittee meeting planning. Previously, we had sent out a survey with 4 subcommittees, and we were in the process of coordinating with TWDB, trying to get some feedback, confirming that our Rio Grande Main Stem Subcommittee number 3 was acceptable by the board and as a non sub-regional committee. And the reason that matters is because unless the subcommittee pertains to the entire region, then there are a different set of rules concerning that particular subcommittee. One of those being, if it is not pertaining to the whole region, then you would have to have a member of the planning group which represents each interest group of the planning group on that committee. So it would be almost every member of the regional planning group would have to be on that subcommittee 3 if it were considered a sub-regional subcommittee. And we did receive some feedback from TWDB on Friday of last week that although it was open to debate, we would have to argue our case that the Rio Grande Main Stem is not regional. And we do have an argument for that, because we do think the entire region contributes to certain aspects of the Rio Grande, such as sediment control and flood early warning systems. So if the Rio Grande were full, you would need flood early warning systems from other parts of the region to, if there were some ways to hold back flood releases from dams, for example, then they would need to coordinate. However, rather than delay this action for vote and try to make that point to TWDB and see if they accept that, we would rather just do a shift in what we consider subcommittee 3, so that we know that we're meeting their criteria on what is considered regional versus sub-regional. So we've done a little bit of a shifting of the subcommittees 2 and 3 since the survey was previously sent out to you all. So if you go to the next slide, this will show what the current revised proposed subcommittees are. So whereas subcommittee 2 was previously the identification and evaluation of potential flood management evaluations and potentially feasible flood management strategies and flood mitigation projects, it's now just going to be identification and evaluation of potential flood mitigation projects. And we've taken that first part, the evaluation of potential flood management evaluations and flood management strategies, and we've moved that to subcommittee 3. And the reason we did that is because most of those topics regarding the Rio Grande main stem were going to be resulting in the FMEs and FMSs. So subcommittee 3 is still going to include the discussions on the Rio Grande main stem issues, but it will also include other topics within the region that would result in FMEs and FMSs. Most of those Rio Grande issues would not really be resulting in a flood mitigation project, from what we understand at this point. So we still think subcommittee 3 is the best subcommittee for really diving into the details of the Rio Grande main stem. However, subcommittee 2 is now going to be focused just on the flood mitigation projects and not the FMEs and FMSs. So we understand that might be a little bit confusing to you all. Sorry to have to change that on you at today's meeting, but we will be sending out an action to vote, and we'll take a look at who all signed up for which subcommittees based on the previous survey in just a couple slides. But for now, we'll just move on to the next slide. I just wanted to cover a couple of the code requirements related to the subcommittees. And these, sorry, it's pretty small text. We understand that. This is more just for reference in case you all want to go back and review some of these codes. But basically, the very first code just says that you can have subcommittees and subgroups that can either be sub-regional or pertain to the whole region. The second 2 bullets here talk about the sub-regional subgroups, subcommittees. And so if you wanted to read some of these regulations, which I just discussed, which talk about how you would have to have a voting member representing each of the interest groups, that's what the second and third bullets are here. And the fourth bullet is just saying that any outcomes from the activities of the committees or subgroups are strictly for the purpose of providing information or recommendations to the full regional flood planning group. And the last few bullets are just saying that the RFPGs cannot authorize the subcommittees or subgroups to modify the budget or scope, or to direct the RFPG's consultants' work or associated expenditure of funds. So that's just more for reference in case you all wanted to read some of the codes related to these, sub-regional groups, so you can understand, why we had this last minute change. You go to the next slide. So these are just a list of the current RFPG committee members. There are voting members and non-voting members. We got this overall list from the URG FPG website, but there were some changes that we made as far as the non-voting members, because there were just some updates on the website that we discussed with Annette, where it seems like you all are in the process of updating who are the voting and non-voting members. So this is our understanding of who the voting and non-voting members are. Again, it's mainly just for reference. We understand it's pretty hard to read. But we can go to the next slide. So these are the subcommittee participation responses to the survey that Annette sent out. And we've boxed the subcommittee 2 right here because we just want you all who signed up previously for that subcommittee 2 to make sure that you're still in alignment with wanting to participate in that one, since we've taken part of those what was previously subcommittee 2 and moved those FMEs and FMSs over to subcommittee 3, since that's where we'll discuss the Rio Grande topics, and any other topics related to the entire region will be in subcommittee 3. So at the end of this meeting, Annette's going to be leading an action to vote, and at that time you can select which subcommittee you would like to participate in. We didn't talk too much about subcommittees 1 and 4 yet, but subcommittee 1 again is task 3A and 3B from the scope of work. We'll be talking about evaluations and recommendations on floodplain management and flood mitigation and flood measurement goals. And subcommittee 4 is actually going to be activated later on in the study after we've kind of fleshed out the details of these first 4 tasks in subcommittees 1 through 3. We'll then be activating probably sometime in March this task 8, which would focus on administrative, regulatory, and legislative recommendations. So that's all I have on the subcommittees. If there's anything else, any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, as I said, Annette will be leading an action to vote at the end of this presentation.
No questions here, but thank you for showing the breakdown the way you did. I think it's very comprehensive.
No problem. Thank you.
Also, just wanted to make
Fantastic.
note. Real quick, Martin, if I could just make a note, there was a question on the chat. There was an update to the slides, so I will send those out to the board, to the planning group after the meeting. So to answer Jeff Bennett's question.
So while we're really excited to hear the feedback we get from those subcommittees and as well from this group, we also recognize that the community has a really large role to play in making sure that this plan is as good as possible, has as many eyes as possible across a really big swath of far West Texas and West Texas. So before we go any further, what we're going to kind of go through in the next handful of slides is kind of our best recommendation on how to engage the public as we move forward on this project based upon our experience working on other major infrastructure projects in the region. There are some constraints and some factors impacting the public involvement approach that are indeed unknown. So what we want to talk about is we have known unknowns and unknown unknowns. We do know that COVID-19 is with us, it remains with us. And if you have an answer to either of these first 2 questions, please let me know, because we need to get you in a room with some experts in Washington and in Austin in terms of, you know, we really don't know what the COVID-19 situation is going to be 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now. So that is very much guiding our some of the questions we have that we're going to seek some consensus from the group on. So of course the big question is, you know, how willing is the public to engage right now? How willing will they be to engage into the future? Again, there's a lot that we don't know there. So some of that is going to us just kind of, I think, have to be collectively getting comfortable with the idea that there's a lot of unknown out there when it comes to the ongoing public health situation. The Fathom dataset bullet point is something that Brian mentioned earlier. There is an expectation that that data will be released by mid to late October of 2021. Now, we do know that whenever that material comes out, it is likely to give us a lot more granularity in terms of the available data. And we are interested to hear from the group as to how much importance we should place upon that on engaging the public. It is very technical information, so it may not mean anything to members of the public, or on the other hand, it may inform what is presented to the public in a way that is incredibly important and would guide some of the thought process moving forward. Another item, that third bullet point, is we heard someone mentioning it earlier. The draft technical memo is due in January, so a lot of the technical team will be largely devoted to that deliverable later on in the year. But we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. what we'll talk about here is just kind of our general public involvement approach. And we'll talk about how some of those things from the last slide touch upon these things on this slide. First and foremost, we know that members of the public are always invited to participate in the flood planning group meetings and the subcommittee meeting group. Now, I'll be honest, and I think we can all recognize, you have to be really, really interested to spend 2 hours with us on a Tuesday morning. However, given that, we recognize there may be folks who have valuable information that just aren't quite that invested. So what you'll see in the following bullet points is a way to really get at those folks who have valuable information, but may not be willing to, come to every Rfpg meeting, come to every subcommittee meeting as well. So again, this is not an either or approach. We recommend in cases of this nature, a yes and. That blue shaded area you see of West Texas is bigger than the state of Indiana. So there is not a one size fits all approach to reaching people across that region. What we're recommending is, of course, we will talk about it more in some subsequent slides, a region-wide survey, which is tailored based upon your flood expertise. Do you have a technical expertise? Do you have a professional expertise? Are you just a layperson who lives in the region and sees with your own 2 eyes flooding issues and can provide valuable feedback that this group may not have? So that survey will be distributed electronically and will be responsive based upon how you respond. You'll get more technical questions if that's your area of expertise. If you're like me, just a layperson, you'll get kind of some more community-based questions. It will be available electronically in both English and Spanish. And for that layperson portion of the survey, we are going to make sure that we have as much, frankly, paper available out there across that broad swath of West Texas and give folks who may not have access, may not have internet access, or may not feel comfortable taking the time to do it online, have an ability to give their feedback on paper and mail it back in. So that's one component that we're recommending moving forward. Another really critically important component is taking the show on the road out there across West Texas. You see flagged on the map 3 communities across West Texas, which we are targeting for these public involvement road shows. We believe it's critically important at these road shows to really, more than anything, provide a roadmap of the public involvement process. Really go out there, explain the ways that people can be involved over the coming months as this process continues to unfold. We will solicit feedback at those meetings, and we will also provide a virtual option for those meetings. Most important, that goes to the COVID concerns. It also just goes to the remoteness concerns of a region this big. There's also a wrap-up public meeting and a public hearing that we would recommend holding in El Paso before all is said and done and the plan is finally adopted. Moving forward to the next slide, if you don't mind, Brian. That's great that we're doing all of those things, but if people aren't aware that we're doing all of those things, then we may as well not be doing all of those things. So this is some of our approach that we're recommending, how to get the community engaged, get the community aware of what is going on and how they can participate. Some things are kind of coming into focus right now that really, we believe now is the time to really have a kickoff news release explaining to media outlets, whether you're watching the news from El Paso, the news from Midland, reading the Big Bend Sentinel, whatever newspaper you pick up, want to make sure you know that this process is going forward, that your feedback is important, that will be coming to areas across the region, and that there is now an online survey, or will soon be an online survey live to provide your feedback. We will talk again about some of those specific public involvement opportunities and let folks know that those roadshow opportunities are coming up. Again, we talked about those paper surveys, really recommending we make sure that, as archaic as it seems, we get as many of those paper surveys to partners or through partner government agencies, to libraries, community centers. So at the end of the day, even if you're not sitting in front of your computer, if that's not how you feel the most comfortable engaging, you've had an opportunity to tell us what's going on in your part of West Texas. We're also recommending creation of a promotion kit. We want to make sure that if you're on the city council in Fort Stockton, you're a county commissioner in Brewster County, you have a way to promote this process, to get your constituents engaged. And we, again, not either or, yes and, we're thinking in terms of printable flyers, English and Spanish, a toolkit of social media graphics for those elected officials, for those partner agencies, to help spread the word and gen up an understanding of what's going on. Another incredibly powerful tool that we have found, and we recommend utilizing in this case, is guest editorials in regional newspapers across that region of West Texas, just talking about the process, because again, we're all intimately acquainted with this process, what it is and what it isn't. But again, you may live in Toya and you know something that we don't know, and we need to make sure that we've explained this process to you so you feel comfortable getting engaged and telling us what you see and what you hear. Moving on to the next slide. This is where we really kind of need some, and we will need some feedback from the group in terms of, how do we move forward? First and foremost, I'm going to start with some recommendations and constraints. We talked about those roadshow meetings that would be held in El Paso, Presidio, and Pecos. We very much recommend keeping all of those roadshow meetings generally together. While the information we would be presenting in Pecos is necessarily different than what we would be presenting in Presidio, we do think it's very important to engage the region kind of at that same point in the process. Whether it is sooner or later, we want to make sure that if you're in El Paso, Presidio, Pecos, or you drove to one of those places, you still get to get that early engagement, that in-person engagement at the same phase of the process. The next bullet point is really very much a technical one. I mean, if you said today, Martin, go as fast as you can does not mean something that would be coming in the next couple of weeks. It's a minimum 30-day turnaround on getting these meetings off the ground. So what we're asking for from the group, and I'll defer to Annette on kind of how we want to manage this this kind of feedback loop, is do we want to look at something in, say, October of 2021, or do we want to look at setting those roadshow meetings up for February of 2020? There's no right or wrong answer in this situation. What you'll see in those subsequent bullet points is really kind of the pros and the cons, because there are pros and cons for both. If we were to go in October, it would truly be a blank slate of public input. We would not have likely gotten many of the surveys back yet. Less technical information would be available. We discussed some of that Fathom data set information not being available. But if we're really just asking the public, hey, what do you see out there in Sanderson? Is that important? It is also earlier in development, so the community will have definitely been engaged at the very, very, very first rung of the ladder. If we were to have those roadshow meetings starting in February of 2022, we could have basically go out there to the community and say, we need you to help us fill in the blanks. We heard from the survey X, Y, and Z. Does this look like what you're seeing on the ground? Have we missed anything critical? Again, some more technical information would be available to actually engage the public with perhaps better information. It would also come a little bit later in development, which can be a pro and a con. The good news is we are not alone in this. There are other flood planning groups across the state that are confronting these exact same issues. I'm going to hand things off to my colleague Susan Roth, who is working with some of those other regional flood planning groups to talk a little bit about what she's encountering as some of the best practices that are emerging from across the state.
That's great. Thank you so much, Martin. And yes, my name is Susan Roth, and I'm an independent civil engineering consultant out of Austin. I have extensive experience working with regional water planning, and especially the Texas Water Development Board, with different funding opportunities through their organization. But I wanted to share, of course, I've known Jeff for 10 years. And so my role, and I'm very excited to be part of this team, is primarily just to provide guidance and to share some of the different good ideas that are being implemented.
So Susan, your audio, you can't quite get it. You're sort of coming in distorted.
Oh no. Oh gosh, can you hear me a little better now? Oh, I apologize, you guys. Can y'all hear me very well?
Well, you can keep going. We can get it, but it's distorted.
Yeah, I really apologize. But I wanted to share as far as some of the other regions and just sharing some of these good ideas from these other regions. For example, like as Martin has shared, there's 2 different times you could possibly have these road shows. You could do it this fall. You could wait until February timeframe of next year. To be honest, Water Development Board, Texas Water Development Board does not have a requirement of when you have to have these meetings. It's just that you have to have had them, these road shows, throughout the planning process. And so, for example, like Royce, this regional flood planning group, they decided to have their roadshow meetings early on in their planning process. We had four different regional, let's say, sub-region planning roadshow meetings, and they had them during May 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. So they had them early on in the process. Whereas for both Lower Brazos and Upper Colorado, those two regional floodplain groups, they decided because of the delay in receiving the Fathom data and just because of the situation right now, they're going to hold off and hold all of their roadshow meetings in more like in the February, March timeframe. I'll turn it back over to you, Martin.
Thanks so much, Susan. So again, I think what everybody heard was that there is no clear right or wrong answer. There are just some different approaches which are being undertaken by folks across the state. With that, Gilbert, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right, just wanted to wait for that to die down. Thank you, Martin. So wanted to really briefly talk about the flood survey and the map viewer. We want to leave more time at the end for discussion for these actions to vote. But just at a high level, we wanted to thank El Paso County and Dave Hall for their assistance in trial running the survey with us. We met with each of them a couple weeks ago with El Paso County on behalf of community representatives and with Dave Hall on behalf of public respondents. And we're able to really hone in on what type of information we need to collect from each group. The survey is actually live right now, so there is a link to that in the presentation. We've emailed that link to Annette, and she will be reaching out to the community representatives in our current contact list early this week. And so we should hopefully start getting some responses for that survey as soon as possible, and we will be following up with them over the phone over the next couple weeks. We'll be indicating providing about a 3-week time frame for survey respondents to respond, and we'll be following up early on and throughout this process to get as much information as we can. On the map viewer side, there's also a separate link, but this is included in the survey itself. This is where you can go in and add review data sets and add any information that you might have in the region for flood prone areas, critical infrastructure, existing flood infrastructure, or proposed projects. In particular, we think the flood prone areas layer is going to be most of interest to the general public because that's where we can get feedback as to areas that we're seeing flooding that may not show up in the flood quilt or any of our previous flood studies from models. So we really want to get as much information from on that as we can. What's really great about this tool is we can go in, we can view other responses, and so we're encouraging everyone to go in and explore, to submit observations, share the link with family, friends, and neighbors. In our trial run with Dave Hall, we actually went through and looked at a particular area of interest. We input some flooding that he observed, and kind of just describing the type of event that the flooding occurred during, and we actually uploaded a photo that he provided. So all of these photos will be available to view through this web viewer, and there's a community sort of crowdsourcing component to the map viewer, which you can like or comment on other posts that others share, to piggyback off of someone else and to consolidate our public responses, you can utilize those two functions. So there's also a user guide that we've developed in English and Spanish that's available through the web, through the map viewer as a link. And we're also putting together a YouTube video to just document a sort of basic workflow to assist as well. And with that, I'll turn it back to Gilbert, who will just talk about our goals for the next month, and then we'll get to the action to vote.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And thank you all for listening through. We still got a lot of work to do, and these are our goals to be performed for our next meeting that's coming up. Just in general, upcoming regional flood planning general meetings, we've got a schedule for October 5th, November 2nd, November 30th. Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be working on scheduling the subcommittee meetings. We're going to concentrate on doing Subcommittee 1 and Subcommittee 3 and get those rolling. We're going to actively work on contacting community representatives and stakeholders to be able to assist them and get those surveys completed. We're going to publicize availability of the individual survey response opportunity. We're going to get back the information, consolidate the data. We're going to start performing the existing and future condition flood risk analysis, which is task 2. We're going to outline the flood mitigation, floodplain management goals and recommendations, which is task 3. We're also going to begin the mitigation needs analysis, which is task 4A. And then the final one will be prepare for identification of flood solutions, which is going to be task 4B. That's going to be starting here in October coming up. With that being said, I know we had discussed earlier, we have some action items that we want to deal with. Annette and Omar, can we go ahead and turn it over to you guys? We got several slides to kind of assist you guys on what we move in here.
Okay, we're ready to go.
All right,
so
guys.
as you all can see on the presentation, our first one is going to be to establish the subcommittee and the committee members who are voting as well as non-voting. And so the first one, as Chris had mentioned, is Subcommittee 1, which is going to cover task 3A and 3B. And so based on the slides that have been presented to us, for Subcommittee B, we would have Gilbert Saldana, Javier Acosta, Carlos Velarde, Dave Hall, Rick Tate, Omar Martinez, Isela Dagnino, and Levi Bryant. And so if we can, I would like to go ahead and have an action item for each subcommittee. So
Annette, can I interrupt you real quick? I know Isela had just sent me she kind of wanted to do Subcommittee 2 and 3 instead of the one she's on right now.
Okay, that's fine. So
So I want to do the ones that I'm on, and then you can add me to.
Oh, Subcommittee.
Yes. Well,
okay.
You want to be on all of them?
What was that?
You want to be on all of them?
Yeah, go ahead and add me to all of them.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay, so then the action item then would be for all the members that were mentioned, and that would be for Subcommittee 1, Task 3A, 3B for you, Chair.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Do we need to list those? Just a question. Do we need to list those that are non-voting members that are going to be added to it too?
Sure, yes. So from those that I mentioned, we would have the ones who are participating in Subcommittee 1 are all voting members.
Sorry, Gilbert,
okay.
Go ahead.
So having said that, I'll entertain a motion to approve Subcommittee number 1 as discussed.
Also moved. That's Dave.
Second, Gilbert Saldana.
With first and second, any further discussion? Anybody else wants to join us? Hearing nothing, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, so for the next subcommittee, 2, and that's going to be dealing with the task 4, and that's the identification and evaluation of potential flood mitigation projects. Who we have here on the committee is going to be Gilbert Saldana, Javier Acosta, Carlos Velarde, Dave Hall, Rick Tate. We have Omar Martinez, Isela Dagnino, and Levi Bryant. And did I miss one? Oh, no, Jeff is a no. Okay, and so those are all voting members. Is there anyone that I missed that wanted to be, oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong list. I'm sorry. Let me start that again. That's what Omar was trying to explain to me. Gilbert Saldana, Jeff Bennett, Javier Acosta, Carlos Velarde, Dave Hall, Omar Martinez, and Isela Dagnino, and Levi Bryant. And so those are all voting members of the flood planning group. Is there anyone that I missed?
Yeah, add me to that, Annette. This is Jay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, Chair.
Okay. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve subcommittee number 2.
So moved.
Sal? Gisela, second.
Okay.
With the first and a second, any further discussion? Anybody else wants to join us? Okay, hearing nothing. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
If we can, real quick, I'm sorry, Carlos Velarde, can we do that motion one more time? And Carlos, can you be on the screen? Can you do that again? The approve the motion?
Okay, hearing first and a second. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we're good. Hearing none, motion passes.
Okay, subcommittee 3. This one is going to be dealing with task 4B as well. And that's the identification and evaluation of potential flood management evaluations and flood management strategies. And that will be, the members we have identified are Jeff Bennett, Sal Masood, Delbert Humberson, Omar Martinez, and Isela Dagnino. And Delbert is the one non-voting member and the others are voting members. Is there anyone else who would like to be included?
You can add me to that, Levi Bryant.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, then at this time, again, I'll entertain a motion to approve the subcommittee as discussed.
Move to approve.
Isela.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second, Jay.
Okay.
Okay.
With the first and a second, any further discussion? Anybody else interested? Hearing nothing. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, and our last subcommittee is going to be focusing on task 8, which includes the administrative, regulatory, and legislative recommendations. And those that we have identified as participating include Gilbert Saldana, we have Anita Keys, Omar Martinez, Isela Dagnino, and Levi Bryant. And of those members, Anita Keys will be a non-voting member. The others are voting. Is there anyone else who would like to be considered for this group?
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Sal, would you consider being part of this group? This is related to the regulations, also for the levies and everything that you've been very concerned with as everybody else.
what my understanding was, that was subcommittee number 3 was the one that has to do with the strategies of that. But if this task or subcommittee number 4 would deal with the regulations that have to do with the levies, yes, I am interested. Thanks, Isela.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else interested? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to approve subcommittee number 4.
Motion to approve, Gilbert.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah. Jeff, a second.
Okay.
The first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing nothing, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
So this is Jeff Irvin. I'm sorry to be breaking in here. I'm not sure I even have status to do it, but I think on the subcommittee 2, I think we're going to have, it would be nice to have the IBWC as a non-voting member on subcommittee 2. I don't think they're in the list that you listed.
Yeah, we did not. There's Delbert. Delbert, would you want to be?
Yeah, I've talked to Chris a little bit last week about some of these others where it might look like it'd be good to have IBWC representation. It just, our main domain is the main stem, so that's where we ended up going.
Well, but we may end up dealing with needs on the levies that are over and beyond what the federal government will finance, for instance. So it may be useful to be on that task too. I think the levies are a big enough issue that they may project, and I think it would be helpful to have the IBWC in that subcommittee.
But would that follow-up come up under discussion under the Rio Grande Main Stem group? As a sort of a catch-all group? Maybe I misunderstood last week, Chris, on how that would go.
Yeah, my understanding when we were speaking last week, where we had that main stem as the subcommittee 3, then that was sort of a catch-all for that. And since our conversation on Friday, where we got some feedback from TWDB and we've shifted it around a little bit, now that subcommittee 3 is focused on the FMEs and FMSs, which will be the main focus of any Rio Grande main stem issues will really come out as FMEs or FMSs. I guess Jeff's point is that he thinks there could be some projects that come out of the Rio Grande discussions as well. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes, and so I just think it's a big issue, and I think the IBWC, there could be projects that come out on the levy side, and it would be helpful to have IBWC in the room on that.
All right, now that makes more sense to me now. I was thinking it all pop up under our purview anyway, the old restructure, or the old structure, that the subcommittee. So I don't have an issue with being on this one.
I don't, I'll be honest, I'm not sure what are Robert's Rules of Order to go back to a motion that was approved. And so if it's all right with everyone, I think what we can do on the October agenda is we can have, if this is something that you all would think is advantageous, to have an agenda item for subcommittees in case some other folks want to come on, they want to come in at a later time. So we can have Delbert participate with subcommittee 2, and then we can put it on the agenda for October to have him formally be a subcommittee, unless someone else has an understanding on Robert's rules, how we can go back to an item that was already approved.
In the past, the city council meetings, when they wanted to go back, they would make another motion to rescind the first approval and then vote it again differently.
Can I count that as the motion you're making, Sal?
I second.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and who seconded? I'm sorry.
I'll second. It's Dave.
Dave. Okay.
So
So
I make a motion to accept all the members that were voted previously, and Annette, you can call them, and adding Mr. Delbert Humberson.
okay.
I think we need to vote on the recession first.
yes. Okay. So a vote on rescinding the previous motion.
First two, for subcommittee 2.
Yes, and we have a first and a second. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Now I'll entertain a motion to re-establish committee number 2, including Delbert into the committee.
So moved.
Second.
So Sal first.
Okay. Who's the second?
David.
Dave.
Okay.
Okay, with the first and a second, any further discussion? Anybody else wants to join? Okay, hearing nothing. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. So then our next item to vote is going to be on the road shows. The action item for you all to consider is whether to establish the meetings in October of 2021 or move them to February of 2022. And so that would be the item for you all to consider. Chairman?
Okay, does anybody feel strongly over either option?
I just have one comment. I don't know how well we're going to be able to motivate the public to respond to the surveys if we don't do this early, which would mean October. I understand that there's not a lot of data available, but if we need this meeting, if the contractor feels that we need this meeting to actually help motivate responses so that we have good data later on, I think it should be early. And that's just my thought. That's the only thing for me that motivates it early. I understand that doing it in February would have a lot more data available if the data comes in. What do you guys think?
There's a question from
I agree
Renee.
with you.
Okay.
I agree. October, it should be great. I think that we should have everybody's input early so that we can move forward with the best possible, outcome. And if we have to tweak it, at least we already have everybody's comments before.
Gilbert, what do you think about needing this to motivate response? Is there going to be enough motivation out there if we don't do this early?
You talking to me?
Yes, sir.
You know what? We're going to make a push here to get it out to the public, reach out to stakeholders and all that. We are going to make the push there, Dave, to get this publicized and all that. So the push will be on our part to let you know.
If you feel, honestly, based on my comment, if you feel that there's an appropriate stimulation out there to get enough responses back without doing an October meeting, then I'm okay with February. But I think the public tends to respond to what they see, visually. And that's just my thought from the public point of view.
This is Jeff. I'm gonna just toss in my 2 cents on this. One thing that the public is going to want to do is they're going to want at these meetings to see where they are themselves relative to the floodplain. And the issue, because they're going to be worried, like I think one of your issues is this whole issue of the Natural Valley floodplain in El Paso, right? So I think if we do it in October, we're going to be missing that whole area that Fathom mapping is going to be improved, hopefully in October and certainly through November. So that whole area that currently has very conservative mapping based upon cell sizes that are 20 meters wide is going to be able to review the flood maps at the meeting in those areas that are covered by that fathom mapping and have a clear sense of what their risks are. That was my, but there's pluses or minuses on both sides. I mean, I think your point that to do it early is a valid point, and as Susan said, there's some regions that think that that's the overriding concern. So it's your choice. But one of the data points you have to consider is this fact that there's a large swath of the region that really has no accurate mapping at this particular time.
This is Sal Masood. Gilbert, first of all, when you say you want to push out to the stakeholders, do you have a more or less idea who the stakeholders are going to be contacting? I just want to make sure that you do reach out to the proper groups that do have concern about land development and flooding issues, number one. Number two, I tend to agree that, the earlier might be a better solution, because right now FEMA maps are under review and comments period that will end soon. And there's a lot of people already kind of commenting, and there's a movement and excitement over that. So that might be helpful in throwing out the survey earlier than later, That's my second comment. So the stakeholders want to make sure that the city does have an organized developers focus group that has, almost everyone in there would be interested to know about the mapping status and the flooding issues. And also the El Paso Association of Builders, whom I'm, currently leading, are very interested in that subject as well. So I just would like to see what kind of stakeholders list you have, Gilbert. Thank you.
Hi, this is Gisela. So the comment period, it already ended. So FEMA is working on all the comments and appeals received. But when we put together some public outreach and meetings to inform all the public, not only developers and et cetera, but also the general public itself, we didn't have much response. It was mostly developers on those calls, city, county, but as far as individual residents, there was, I don't think there were any on the call. So that's going to be the challenge, and I think we need to get everybody involved since the very beginning, so that people can feel the ownership of this project and have more input and be more engaged, because that'll definitely benefit everybody in this group.
Gilbert, just one other thought before you comment here. Is it possible for us to do it early at the locations, and then if there is some failure in a given area to get responses, to go back out to that area in February or March and hit that one area again?
Okay. And just to answer Sal's question first, we do have a list of stakeholders that we have provided to Annette. We're continuing to work on that. We do have governments, we have water districts out there, we have everybody that we have right now that we can put on there. But if you have a list of certain people that you would like on there as well, go ahead and send us those contact points, and we'll include them in there. But we do have a database right now of stakeholders that we are reaching out, and we'll be sending out the survey.
I would like to ask the group, is there, and this would be both AECOM and the group, would there be any sort of value in perhaps having a roadshow in El Paso in October, but then having the other road shows in February? And the only reason why I was thinking that is because with the floodings that have recently occurred, it's obviously on people's minds, it's fresh. And so in terms of input from the public, I think we'd have a better shot in that manner. I know that listening to Commissioner's Court several weeks ago, there were many members from the public who were calling in to talk about the flooding. And so I think that if we would reach out to the commissioners and the city council to talk to see what database they've created, I think we have a good chance of getting the public to participate in this venue. But I don't know if this would possibly take away from our other areas of the region for Pecos and for Presidio. So like, I don't know if Levi or Carlos, if you all felt, or Jeff, if you feel like there would be anything that would be missing if your meetings were not being pushed forward until February.
There's been a lot of flooding out here, the Davis Mountains and surrounding areas. So it's very much on people's minds. But if we're going to have better maps for people to consider after October, I can see reason to go both ways, I guess. I'd kind of like the people to be thinking about what their observations over the last 2 months and how it impacts this planning process. So I don't know.
Yeah, one point I'll make, this is Chris Wright, is that in El Paso County area, we do have a lot more information and floodplains. We have the preliminary FEMA floodplains that were just, as Isela mentioned, the comment appeal period just ended for those. So there are a lot of gaps to fill in the outskirts of El Paso with the Fathom data set, but within El Paso County, we have a lot of flood information. So from that perspective, it could make sense to go ahead and have the El Paso County meeting in October, and then once we get the Fathom data set in February timeframe, that would give us the information to where we could fill in the gaps in the other parts of the region and have more information to present at that time in February over in the Pecos and Presidio roadshow areas. So that'd be an argument to do it that way.
I guess if we're going to pique public interest in the rural areas through guest editorials in the Sentinel or whatever paper we choose, and that's something that can be maintained through the fall, then maybe a meeting out here in February is fine. Sorry about that.
Do we need a motion then for El Paso in October and the Presidio and Pecos in February?
Does Carlos want to say anything?
Carlos, Levi, any other comments before we move on to voting?
No, I'm okay with that.
That's fine with me. I think I'd like to see the updated data for a lot of, the eastern region and that border before meetings occur.
Okay. And then one thing I want to add is El Paso Water Utilities took a pretty big PR hit as a result of these last floods. I think that having the roadshow in October, I think is very timely for El Paso County. So having said that, I'll entertain a motion at this point based on the discussions we had that we would have a roadshow in October 2021 in El Paso County, and then the other two roadshows in Presidio and in Pecos in February 22.
So moved.
So moved.
Jeff and
Dave?
Yeah, Jeff and Dave. Okay, we have first and a second. Any further discussion? Are we okay with this plan? Hearing nothing. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Gilbert, do you have any tentative date yet kind of selected for October?
I think with that being said, I'll kind of turn it over to Martin. I know we have a 30-day minimum period that we need to publicize this. So knowing full well that we're September 7th right now, we'd probably be looking sometime later in October. Martin?
Just exactly to echo what Gilbert said, we will make sure that we are not getting, frankly, too close up to the holiday. I mean, I know Halloween is not like a holiday that will take a lot of people away in the way that like Thanksgiving or Christmas is, but we do just have to contend with people's attention maybe elsewhere, especially if they have kids. So we'll make sure we get it as early in the month as possible. But if I had to bet, I would say look at it in probably the week of the 18th or early the week of the 25th, just kind of ballpark.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that consideration.
For those of us that are on a couple subcommittees and want to go to all these things, we need to be real cognizant of the facts, you know, what dates are selected so we can kind of participate in everything.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Was that the end?
Okay.
Yeah, that's the end.
ACOM team, do y'all need any further motions? Otherwise, I'll hand it back over to you.
No, sir. I think that's it. We're done. We appreciate the time and allowing us to present. But Sal, again, or anybody else on the group, if you've got some contact points that need to be on that list, we did make the list available to Annette. If you guys can look at that list and maybe add some contacts that we need to reach out to as well as a stakeholder or community, that would be great.
I will.
Oh shit, I don't have the agenda right now. I'll go to that. Do you want to? We do have a question though on these subcommittees, and this will be for Richard. We're required to follow the same posting requirements on subcommittees as we are with the groups, and so in terms of Open Meetings Act, how are we dealing with subcommittees? In terms of the participation, if we do that virtually, but we have somebody serving as a chair, then we can post that physically where somebody can come and view the subcommittee. Would that be correct, Richard?
That sounds reasonable. Any subcommittee follows the exact same open meetings guidance as full Rfpg meetings. So final decision comes down to the Rio Grande COG legal interpretation. But yes, that sounds reasonable to have the chair present of the subcommittee that's accessible to the public.
Okay, so then that's something that we're going to need to be considering. Oh, it's over here. We're going to need to be considering, Gilbert and AECOM team, in terms of the frequency of the subcommittees. There's going to be a lot of coordination required for that to ensure that we are adhering to the requirements. And so when we talked about the schedules, Gilbert, you pointed out the schedules for the planning group, but we still need to establish dates for the subcommittees. Is that correct?
This is Chris Wright. Yes, that is correct. We have not established dates for the subcommittee meetings yet. So, I mean, we can talk about that right now if we have time, or we can send out another one of those polls like we did previously. It's up to y'all.
Okay, we can go ahead and do the, we can do it then on the, I'll be sending out the doodle post to see what dates are going to be working for everyone, and we'll coordinate it that way.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I was on mute earlier.
That's okay. So, so I think we can go ahead and then if we've taken care of all the items from AECOM, we can go back to agenda item 11 for the chair.
Okay. Moving on then, discussion of old business. I know the one thing we have to talk about is the flood planning group's website.
And I will bring that up at the moment. Let's see if it's coming up this way.
It's here.
Okay. Wherever you see it.
I don't think we have.
I think I have to make me as the presenter. Let me do that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to go ahead and make me the presenter so you all can see. Oh, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so can everyone see the site now?
And that we can see it. What's the address for the site?
It'll be urgfpg.org. And one of the things that I thought Omar and I were strategizing in terms of the survey, I think we can put a some notification on here to click to access survey. So that'll be the first thing they see on the site. So we'll be working on that to direct people on where they can go to fill out their survey. For the meetings, what you'll be doing here is when you click on meetings, you'll see that we have the calendar and then we also have the meeting notices. On this item here for the meeting notices materials, oops, I think this is an old one. This is not the, let me see if yeah, here we go. Okay, so you can see here the previous meetings that we've had where we include the agenda. This is all because we were on GoToMeeting, and we can still continue that with Teams as well. If we're working in a hybrid environment, you'll be able to see the meeting, the agenda, the slide deck, those who attended, and then you can have access to the video, which will take you to the YouTube channel. So if you all need to go back and review those items, they'll be there. So like right now, we just have the agenda with the materials, but after this meeting, I'll have the minutes included as well. On the calendar section, this is where we can start adding the meetings that we're talking about right now. There we go. So like right now, I didn't have the agenda. I didn't have this agenda on there for this meeting, but come October 5th, we'll start putting those in. And we're going to be moving to Teams. This will be the last time that we're using GoToMeeting. So I'm sorry for changing it on you today, but moving forward, it'll be on Teams. So you'll be able to see the meeting type, and then you'll have the link as well. Just remember that it won't be active until the day of the meeting. So please be sure to be looking at the calendar to be able to make reference to when the meetings are going to be occurring. And then on the planning documents, right now, what we do have, these are the ones that we have right now, and we pulled a lot of them from Water Development Board. But as we need space, we can start moving some of these out and putting other items on here. So there was a question asked if they could have access to the previous studies that were mentioned. So maybe we can include those studies on these planning documents here. And then in terms of the membership, here are the members and the bylaws. I'll update the members because it's not showing correctly in terms of who's voting and non-voting. Under interested parties, this section here is talking about if anybody wants to be notified about our meetings, they can do that by signing up here. And then there's also a public comment section. And so I'll be working with AECOM to see if there's any other revisions I need to be making based on the survey and any other items that we're going to be including onto the site. Are there any questions for me on the website itself?
And that if you can add the data for the 5 August meeting to your matrix that has all of the agenda and the minutes and all that stuff, it would help.
Okay, let's see here real quick. So we're going to go back to.
Yeah, on that, I went to that page this morning and looked for the information for 5 August, and it wasn't on there. So
okay, I will place that on there. I'm sorry, I did not put August A. Yes, sir. I will add that on there.
okay, thanks.
It looks really good, Annette. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, I can add to my resume WordPress. Thank you. So we'll see. You guys can grade it and let me know what needs to be revised. But I'll be depending on Omar as usual to help me along. But we'll hopefully this will be the go-to site for everybody to retrieve their information. So it'll be a lot easier on you for your emails. And so I think, Omar, that's all I have under the old business. And so then we have general comments.
So item number 12, general public comments. Is there anybody from the public with us today that wants to make a comment? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to item number 13, consider date and agenda items for the next meeting. ACOM already helped us set date. In terms of agenda items, other than adding a subcommittee meeting section, anything else that you all want to talk about?
I would want to mention that October 5th, for now, we can keep it as such. The physical location will be here at the El Paso County Water Improvement District. So if there are any of you who do want to be present, you can do so by coming to this office. If not, it'll still be virtual. And then, Richard, there are 2 agenda items that I for sure need to add to that meeting based on Water Development Board. Are there any other items for us to start considering as well?
Yeah, just for everyone's notice, I'll work with Annette to suggest 2 just administrative agenda items dealing with the budget and administrative expenses for you all to review and approve them. So that'll be on for next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Anything else?
This is Chris Wright again. I was just gonna make a quick note that during the last meeting, Gisela had asked about the Fathom data set in our region. And we had reached out to one of our sub-consultants, Aqua Strategies, who is part of the team that is putting together that Fathom data set. And we just asked him if he could share any information about the data set in our particular region. And he put together a brief memo for us, a draft memo that we're considering including in our chapter 1. And so following this meeting, not as part of the official meeting minutes or anything, but in a separate email, we were planning to send out that memo, that draft memo to the flood planning group, this regional flood planning group, for their review to include as in the chapter 1. So it's not intended to be made a public document. It's a draft for a section to include in the chapter 1, but it'll give you an idea of the level of accuracy within our particular region and the level of coverage within our region. But again, that's to be asked to be kept within the flood planning group and not as a public document.
Chris, just make sure you keep the word draft in somewhere in the document or on the title. That way, it's kept, I guess.
Right. Yep, yeah. It is. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Hearing no further comments, let's move on to item number 14. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
If you can have everyone's camera on. There we go. Thank you. Okay.
So moved.
Jeff.
Okay.
Second.
Gilberto Saldaña.
Okay.
Okay, with first and second, any further discussion? Anybody want to stick around? Okay, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys at 12:45.